The smell hit Jonah Burke before his eyes adjusted to the darkness, rust, and decay. Thick enough to choke on. He pushed the stable door wider. October wind cutting through his worn flannel. He'd come for a horse. Just a horse. $12 saved over 6 months. Enough to buy old copper and haul timber through winter. But the blood changed everything. Dark streaks painted the wooden wall, dried and brown. His hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt. Then he heard it, a faint metallic rattle from the back corner. Chains. Jonah's boots scraped across dirt as he moved deeper into shadow. His heart hammered against his ribs. She was there. Chained to the wall like an animal. Young woman. Blonde hair, matted with filth. Cloth gag cutting into her mouth. Her eyes, blue and wide with terror, locked onto his. For one frozen moment, neither moved. Then everything went to hell. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching. From now, let's continue with the story. Jonah Burke had lived 48 years, and every one of them showed in the deep lines around his eyes. The Montana wilderness had a way of carving itself into a man's face, leaving permanent marks like initials carved in tree bark. His hands, rough as the bark itself, had spent the last decade gripping axe handles and saw blades, turning pine into profit 1 tree at a time. He stood 6'2", though he walked with the slight stoop of someone who'd learned to make himself smaller, less noticeable. His brown hair had gone gray at the temples, and his beard, thick and unkempt, hid the worst of the scars. The one across his left shoulder blade, hidden beneath his shirt, told a story he'd stopped sharing years ago. The cabin where Jonah lived sat 15 miles from Timber Ridge, deep enough in the forest that he could go weeks without seeing another soul. That's how he preferred it. The single-room structure held everything he owned: a cot, a stove, a table he'd built himself, and 3 tin plates gathering dust in the cupboard. The top 2 hadn't been used in 10 years. He'd come to town today for one reason. Winter was 6 weeks out, maybe less, and hauling timber on his back wasn't going to cut it anymore. His body ached in ways it hadn't 5 years ago. The advertisement on the town bulletin board had been simple: horse for sale, Morrison Homestead, 12. Morrison. The name had stopped him cold when he'd read it, but he'd pushed the memory down like he pushed down everything else. Samuel Morrison had been dead a decade. Someone else owned the property now. Jonah had worked 6 months to save those $12. $2 a week when the logging was good? Nothing when it wasn't. $12 meant the difference between eating through winter or starving with a horse. He could double his output, maybe triple it. Without one, he'd be lucky to see spring. The Morrison homestead sat 3 miles outside Timber Ridge, 20 acres of overgrown scrub and timber. The main house had burned down 2 years back or so, people said. Jonah hadn't been close enough to town to hear the details. The stable still stood, though, weathered gray wood and a roof that sagged in the middle. He'd noticed things were wrong before he'd even opened the door. No smoke from any chimney, no sound of life. Fresh wagon tracks in the dirt, but they looked recent, too recent for an abandoned property. And the horse, visible through the stable's side window, had been thin, ribs showing through its hide. Jonah had learned long ago to trust his instincts. They'd kept him alive through worse than this, but he'd opened the door anyway. Jonah moved slowly, hands visible, palms out. The woman flinched away from him, chains rattling against the wall. Her wrists were raw beneath the iron shackles, skin broken and bleeding. He could see her throat working, trying to make sound around the gag, but only small whimpers emerged. "Easy now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to hurt you." Her eyes darted to the door behind him, then back to his face. She was young, mid-20s. He guessed with blonde hair that might have been beautiful before weeks of neglect had turned it into a matted tangle. The dress she wore had once been fine quality. He could tell that much, but now it hung in tatters, stained with dirt and things he didn't want to identify. He took another step closer. She pressed herself against the wall, shaking her head frantically. I'm going to take that gag off," Jonah said. "Then we're getting you out of here. Understand?" She stared at him, chest heaving with rapid breaths. After a long moment, she gave the smallest nod. Jonah reached forward carefully and untied the cloth. It came away damp and foul-smelling. The woman gasped, drawing in deep lungfuls of air. Her mouth opened like she wanted to speak, but her throat was too damaged. Only a raspy croak emerged. "Don't try to talk yet," he said. He looked at the chains. Heavy iron, old but solid, bolted directly into the wooden beam behind her. The shackles were locked with a simple padlock. "I need to find the key." He scanned the stable. Hay bales stacked in the corner, a few rusted tools hanging on the far wall, a water trough, long, dry, and there, on a wooden post near the door, a ring of keys. Jonah grabbed them and returned to her side. His hands shook slightly as he tried each key. The third one clicked. The shackles fell away. The woman's legs buckled immediately. Jonah caught her before she hit the ground, surprised by how light she was. Too light. He could feel her ribs through the thin fabric of her dress. "How long?" he asked. "How long have you been here?" She opened her mouth, tried again. This time a whisper emerged. "Weeks, 6, maybe 7. His jaw tightened. 6 weeks. Chained in a stable like livestock. "Who did this?" Before she could answer, the stable door burst open. Sunlight flooded in, silhouetting a heavy-set man with a rifle. "Step away from her," the man said. His voice trembled, high-pitched with panic. Jonah straightened slowly, positioning himself between the woman and the gun. "Put that down." "I said, step away." The man's hands were shaking so badly the rifle barrel wavered in small circles. Jonah studied him. 50s, jowly face slick with sweat, eyes wide with terror more than rage. This wasn't a hardened criminal. This was a scared man making scared choices. "You don't want to shoot me," Jonah said evenly. "You don't understand." The man's voice cracked. "They'll kill me. They'll kill Emily." "Who's Emily?" "My daughter." Tears were streaming down the man's face now. "They have my daughter, 16 years old. They said if I didn't keep her here." He gestured wildly at the woman behind Jonah. "They'll kill Emily. They'll do to her what they... Jonah's stomach turned. "Who are they? I can't. If I tell you, they'll know. They're going to kill your daughter anyway," Jonah said, his voice hard. "Men who do this don't leave witnesses. They don't keep bargains." The rifle lowered an inch. "I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Jonah took a step forward. "You're making one right now. You can let us walk out of here. Tell me who these men are, and maybe we can save your daughter, or you can pull that trigger." And Emily is scared and alone. The man's face crumpled. "Sheriff Garrett," he whispered, "and others. I don't know all their names, but Garrett. He runs it. He came to me 6 months ago, said I owed him money. I've never borrowed from him. But he had papers, signatures that looked like mine. $200. I'm a farmer. I don't have that kind of money. So he made you a deal." The man nodded miserably. "Keep the women here, just for a few days each," he said. "Then they'd be moved somewhere else. I just had to make sure they didn't escape, and if I did it, the debt would be forgiven. But if I didn't—" His voice broke. "They took Emily from church 3 months ago. Said she was insurance." Behind Jonah, the woman made a small sound. He glanced back. Her face had gone even paler. "What's your name?" Jonah asked the man. "Howard. Howard Finch." "Howard, I'm going to give you a chance most men don't deserve. Lower that rifle. Tell me where they're keeping Emily. And then you're going to go home, lock your doors, and pray we can fix this." "You can't fix this," Howard said, but the rifle was pointing at the ground now. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Garrett owns this town. He's got men everywhere. The law, the mayor, half the merchants." "Then we don't go through the law." Jonah moved forward and took the rifle from Howard's unresisting hands. "Where's your daughter?" "I don't know. They move her different places. I've tried to find her, but—" A sharp crack split the air. The rifle had discharged when Howard jerked it up in one last desperate attempt. The bullet tore through the stable roof, sending splinters of wood raining down. Jonah reacted on instinct. His fist connected with Howard's jaw. A controlled blow that sent the man sprawling into the dirt. Howard lay there, dazed but conscious, blood trickling from his split lip. "Stay down," Jonah said. He turned to the woman. She'd managed to pull herself upright using the wall, though her legs still shook. "Can you walk?" She nodded. "Then we're leaving? Now." He guided her toward the door, supporting most of her weight. Howard didn't try to stop them. He just lay in the dirt, sobbing quietly. Outside, Jonah's wagon waited, and in the stable's small paddock, the horse he'd come to buy copper stood watching with dark, knowing eyes. Jonah made a decision in that moment. He led the woman to the wagon, helped her into the hay-filled bed, then went back for the horse. "Consider the debt paid," he said to Howard, as he led Copper out. Howard said nothing. He'd curled into himself, arms wrapped around his knees, rocking slightly. Jonah climbed onto the wagon seat, took the reins, and started down the long road into the forest. Behind them, the Morrison homestead disappeared into the afternoon haze. The woman lay silent in the back, and Jonah didn't press her for words. There would be time for questions later. Right now, they just needed to survive. The first 3 days passed in careful silence. Jonah's cabin felt smaller with another person in it, the walls closing in despite the woman occupying only a corner near the fireplace. He'd given her the cot and taken the floor himself, though he barely slept those first nights. Every crack of a branch outside brought him awake, rifle in hand. She didn't speak that first morning. He'd heated water for washing and left it in a basin with soap and a cloth, then stepped outside to give her privacy. When he returned, she'd cleaned her face and hands, but still wore the same torn dress. He found an old shirt of his, too large but clean, and left it folded on the chair. She took it without meeting his eyes. Food was harder. Her throat was raw from the gag, and she could barely swallow broth. He made it thin, mostly water with a few vegetables from his small garden plot. She managed half a cup before turning away. By the second day, she could walk without support, though she moved like a frightened animal, quick, jerky motions, always keeping him in her line of sight. She never turned her back to him, never let him get between her and the door. Jonah understood. He kept his distance, spoke only when necessary, moved slowly and deliberately. Trust would take time, if it came at all. On the second afternoon, she ventured outside while he chopped wood. He watched from the corner of his eye as she approached the small paddock where Copper stood grazing. The horse lifted his head, ears forward. She extended a shaking hand. Copper walked to her immediately, pressing his nose into her palm. And for the first time since Jonah had found her, the woman smiled. It lasted only a moment, but he saw it. That evening, she spoke her first voluntary words. "That horse," she said, her voice still hoarse. "His name is Copper." Jonah looked up from the fire he was tending. "How do you know that?" "He was my father's horse." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'd know him anywhere. That white on his forehead, the way his left ear flops. My father loved that horse more than anything except—" She trailed off. "Except what?" "Except me." The tears spilled over. "His name was Samuel Morrison." The poker Jonah had been holding clattered to the floor. He stared at her, his mind racing back through the years. Samuel Morrison, his friend, his best friend, once, before the world had torn everything apart. Samuel had a daughter, he said slowly, but her name was Sarah. Sarah was my nickname. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. My full name is Sarah Elise Morrison. I started using Elise after my father died. I wanted a fresh start, a new name for a new life. Her voice broke. "That worked out well?" Jonah sat down heavily in his chair. "Your father asked me to watch over you 10 years ago, on his deathbed. He made me promise." She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Then you're Jonah Burke." He nodded. "He talked about you, said you were the best man he knew." She laughed bitterly. "He also said something happened to you, that you lost your family in a fire, that you blamed yourself even though it wasn't your fault." "It was my fault," Jonah said quietly. "Was it? Did you start the fire?" "No." "Then how was it your fault?" He didn't answer. The old guilt rose in his chest like floodwater, drowning out reason. He'd been over it 1,000 times in his mind, and the answer was always the same. He should have been there, should have saved them, should have done something, anything other than what he'd done. "My father died in a logging accident," Elise said. "At least that's what they told me. The cable snapped, crushed him instantly. I was 15. My mother had died giving birth to me, so I had no one. Distant relatives took me in, moved me east to Pennsylvania. I stayed there until last year." "What brought you back?" "I got married. Thomas Burke, no relation to you. Different Burke family. He was a school teacher, gentle and kind. He got a position in Timber Ridge, and I jumped at the chance to come home. I wanted to see the mountains again, walk the places my father walked." She looked down at her hands. "Thomas fell ill 6 months after we arrived. Tuberculosis. The doctor said he lasted 3 months, wasting away a little more each day. By the end, I could barely recognize him. I'm sorry. Everyone was sorry. The whole town came to the funeral. All these people I barely knew, telling me how sorry they were. And then they left, and I was alone again. Her voice hardened. The sheriff came to visit a week later. Said he wanted to make sure I was managing all right. Said a young widow needed protection in a rough town like this. Said he could provide that protection if I'd let him. Jonah's jaw tightened. Garrett. I told him no. Politely at first, then firmly when he wouldn't take the hint. He didn't like that. Started coming round more often, always with some excuse, checking on me. He'd say, making sure I was safe. But the way he looked at me... She shuddered. What happened? I was leaving church one Sunday morning. Someone grabbed me from behind in the alley beside the building, put something over my face, chloroform, I think. I woke up in that stable, chained to the wall. Howard Finch came twice a day with food and water. He never spoke to me, never looked at me directly, just set the bowl down and left. Did you see anyone else? Sometimes I heard voices outside, men talking. I couldn't make out words, but I recognized the sheriff's voice once, and I heard them talking about the others. Women, I think. They said I was number 4. Jonah stood and walked to the window. Outside, dusk was settling over the forest. Howard said they were moving you. Did he say we're California? I heard the men say something about buyers in San Francisco, that some mine owner paid top dollar for young women to work in his establishments. She said the last word with venom. They're trafficking women. Yes. She pulled the oversized shirt tighter around herself. And they've done it before. Howard let something slip, once said the others disappeared without a trace. No bodies, no evidence. The town just assumed they'd moved away or run off. Who's going to look for a widow with no family, or a saloon girl nobody cared about, or a drifter passing through? Someone should have looked, but nobody did. Elise met his eyes. Except you. You weren't even looking for me, and you found me anyway. My father used to say the Lord works in mysterious ways. Maybe he was right. Jonah turned back to the window. Your father made me promise to protect you if anything happened to him. I failed that promise. I was so buried in my own grief that I forgot about everyone else, including you. You didn't know I'd come back. I should have checked, should have done something. He pressed his palm against the cold glass. I've spent 10 years hiding in these woods, telling myself I was better off alone, that I didn't deserve connection after failing to protect the people I loved, and maybe I don't, but I won't fail your father again. What are you saying? He turned to face her. I'm saying they won't touch you again. Sheriff or not, connections or not, they won't take you. I don't care how many men Garrett has. I don't care if the whole damn town is working with him. They'll kill you. They can try. He walked to the mantel and took down a framed photograph, faded and cracked, but still visible. A woman with kind eyes holding a small boy who grinned at the camera. This is Martha and Daniel, my wife and son. They died because I wasn't there to protect them. Because someone wanted to send a message, and I was too blind to see it coming. Elise studied the photograph. Daniel? She whispered. When I was delirious in the wagon, I kept saying that name. I dreamed about a little boy. He was calling for his father. Jonah's hands trembled slightly. Sometimes I still hear him. Late at night, when the wind blows through the pines, I hear him calling for me, and I can't answer. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just know that I understand what it means to lose everything, and I understand what it means to have one last chance to make something right. He set the photograph back carefully. Your father gave me that chance. You gave me that chance. I'm not going to waste it. The fourth morning dawned cold and clear, frost glittering on the pine needles outside. Jonah woke to find Elise already up, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in her hands. She'd learned where he kept things, had started the fire and made the coffee herself while he slept. Small steps toward normalcy. I want to learn to shoot, she said without turning around. Jonah sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Why? Because I need to protect myself, because I won't be helpless again. Now she looked at him, and he saw steel in her eyes that hadn't been there before. My father taught me when I was young, but that was years ago. I need to remember. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. After breakfast. They ate in companionable silence bacon and beans. Simple fare, but filling. Lise had gained back some color in her cheeks over the past days, though she was still too thin. She needed weeks of good food and rest, but there might not be time for that. Outside. Jonah set up targets against a fallen log tin cans filled with dirt. He showed her the rifle first, how to load it, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze rather than pull. It's going to kick, he warned. Brace yourself. Her first shot went wide, the recoil knocking her back a step, but her second shot clipped the edge of a can. By the 10th shot, she'd knocked over 3. You weren't lying, Jonah said. Your father taught you well. He said every woman in Montana should know how to shoot, that the wilderness doesn't care about propriety or delicate sensibilities. She reloaded with steady hands. He was right. They spent 2 hours practicing. Jonah showed her the pistol, too. How different it felt from the rifle. How you had to account for the shorter barrel. She learned quickly, muscle memory returning faster than either of them expected. When they finished, Jonah walked the perimeter of his property, showing her the tripwires he'd set, the bell system he'd rigged using tin cans and fishing line. If anyone comes up the main trail, you'll hear it. These 2 paths are the only other ways in, and I've got them covered, too. You're expecting them? Howard will talk eventually. Either they'll force it out of him, or he'll trade the information to try and get his daughter back. Either way, they'll come. Elise touched one of the tripwires gently. How long do we have? Days, maybe a week if we're lucky. What's the plan? Jonah had been thinking about that, turning it over in his mind during the long watches of the night. We can't run. You're not strong enough yet, and they'd track us down anyway. Can't go to the law. Garrett is the law. Can't trust anyone in town. We don't know who's working with him. So we wait for them to come to us. No. He looked at her carefully. We go to them first. She blinked. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the last thing they'd expect. He gestured for her to follow him back inside. At his small table, he spread out a hand-drawn map of Timber Ridge and the surrounding area. I know these woods better than anyone. Spent 10 years walking every inch of them. I know where they'd hold Howard's daughter. Has to be somewhere they can watch her, but keep her hidden. Probably one of the old mining camps up in the hills. There are dozens of those. 3 that are still accessible by wagon, 2 that have water sources. He pointed to marks on the map. We find the girl. We free her. That removes their leverage over Howard. then he'll talk. And if he won't, then we make him—" Jonah's voice was cold. "I don't like it, but we need evidence. We need names, dates, anything we can take to the territorial marshal in Helena, someone outside Garrett's reach." Elise studied the map. "When do we leave?" "We don't. I leave. You stay here where it's safe." "No." He looked up sharply. "This isn't negotiable." "You're right. It's not. I'm coming with you." She met his gaze without flinching. "You'll need someone to watch your back. And if we find Emily, she'll be traumatized. She'll need another woman there, someone who understands what she's been through. It's too dangerous." "It's too dangerous for you to go alone." Elise leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "I know you feel responsible for me. I know you made a promise to my father. But I'm not a child, Jonah. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be locked away for her own protection. I've been chained up and helpless for 6 weeks. I won't be helpless again." They stared at each other across the table. Finally, Jonah let out a long breath. "If we do this, you follow my lead. No arguments, no hesitation. If I say run, you run. Understand? If you promise the same, despite everything." He almost smiled. "Deal." That evening, as they prepared supplies for the journey, Elise suddenly gasped and pressed a hand to her stomach. Jonah was at her side in an instant. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Her face had gone pale, but there was wonder in her eyes. "I felt it. The baby, it moved." He went very still. "Baby? I'm pregnant, 2 months along, maybe a little more." She looked at him with something like defiance. "It's Thomas's child. I found out after he died. The doctor confirmed it." Jonah sat down slowly. "Does anyone else know?" "I don't think so. I hadn't told anyone yet. I was still grieving Thomas, trying to figure out how to manage alone. And then they took me." Her hand remained on her stomach, protective. "Howard might have guessed. I was sick some mornings, but I never told him." "That's why they kept you alive. Pregnant women fetch a higher price." She flinched but didn't deny it. "Yes, you can't come with me." It wasn't a request this time. "I won't risk both of you. The baby is exactly why I have to come. I won't bring a child into this world while monsters like Garrett walk free. I won't live in fear that they'll come back and finish what they started." Her voice shook but remained firm. "My child deserves a mother who fights, not one who hides." Jonah pressed his hands to his face, feeling the weight of impossible choices. "Your father would kill me if he knew I was letting you do this. My father taught me to stand up for what's right. Consequences be damned, he'd understand." They left before dawn on the 5th day. Jonah carried the rifle and his hunting knife, along with rope, matches, and dried meat. Elise wore pants he'd modified to fit her scandalous by-town standards, but practical for moving through rough terrain. She carried the pistol and a smaller knife. The first mining camp was a 5-mile hike through dense forest. They moved quietly. Jonah reading the land like a book, broken branches here, boot prints there, signs of recent passage. But when they reached the old camp, it was empty. The building sagged and rotted, clearly abandoned for years. "One down," Elise whispered. The second camp was another 4 miles northeast, higher up in the hills. The terrain grew rockier, harder to navigate. Twice they had to backtrack to find passable routes. By midday, they'd covered the distance. This camp showed signs of life, fresh wheel ruts in the dirt, a water barrel that wasn't crusted with algae, smoke stains on the chimney of the main building. Jonah held up a hand, and they crouched behind a stand of pines. He studied the camp carefully. One main building, two smaller shacks, a corral with no horses, no movement visible. Could be a trap, he murmured, or it could be where they're keeping her. They waited, watching for 30 minutes. Finally, a door opened and a man stepped out, young, maybe 25, wearing a deputy's badge. He lit a cigarette and leaned against the wall, looking bored. One guard, Jonah breathed, means they're not expecting trouble. They circled around, using the forest for cover until they could approach from the back. The smaller shacks had no windows. Perfect for holding a prisoner, Jonah pointed to the right-hand shack and gestured for Elise to stay low. They crept forward, moving from cover to cover. The guard remained oblivious, smoking and staring at nothing. At the shack door, Jonah tested it gently, locked, but a simple latch. He pulled out his knife and worked it into the gap, lifting the bar on the other side. It took 2 minutes of careful manipulation, but the latch gave. Inside, huddled in the corner on a thin blanket, was a girl, 16, dark hair tangled, wearing a dress that had once been Sunday best. When she saw them, her eyes went wide with terror. Elise moved past Jonah immediately, hands up in a peaceful gesture. Emily Finch." The girl nodded frantically, tears starting to stream down her face. "We're here to help. Your father sent us." Elise knelt beside her. "We're getting you out of here." "He's outside," Emily whispered. "The deputy. He checks on me every hour." "We know. We'll handle him." Jonah glanced at Elise. "Get her ready to move. I'll deal with the guard." He slipped back outside, moving along the wall toward where the deputy still stood. The man had finished his cigarette and was starting to turn back toward the door when Jonah struck an arm around his throat, cutting off air, not killing, but choking him into unconsciousness. The deputy struggled for 10 seconds, then went limp. Jonah dragged him into the shack and used the rope to bind him tightly, gagging him with his own bandana. "That'll hold for a few hours." Emily was on her feet now, supported by Elise. She looked at Jonah with frightened eyes. "Are you really here to help? Or is this another test?" "Test? They do that sometimes. Pretend to rescue me, see if I'll run, then punish me for trying." Her voice was flat, dead. "I don't fall for it anymore." Elise's face went hard with rage, but her voice stayed gentle. "This is real. Emily, I promise. Look at me. Do you see your father's eyes in my face? He told me you have his eyes." Emily peered at her, and something broke in her expression. "Papa, is he alive?" "They said if I tried to escape, they'd kill him. He's alive, and he's been trying to find you." Elise helped her toward the door. "But we need to move now, before anyone else comes." They made it back to the forest before the deputy woke. His muffled shouts followed them for a few minutes, then faded as they put the distance between themselves and the camp. Emily stumbled frequently, weak from captivity, but she refused to stop. "We have to warn my father. If they find out I'm gone, they'll kill him for sure." "Where is he?" Jonah asked. "Home. I think they let him go back most days, as long as he does what they say." Emily's breath came in ragged gasps. "He's been bringing food to someone, another woman. I heard them talking about it." "That was me?" Elise said softly. Your father kept me alive." Emily looked at her with new understanding. Then he's not all bad, even when they made him do terrible things. No, Elise agreed. He's not all bad. He's just a man trying to save his daughter. They reached Jonah's cabin as sunset painted the sky, orange and red. Emily collapsed on the cot, exhausted. Elise brought her water and bread, which she devoured like she hadn't eaten in days. "They only fed me once a day," Emily explained between bites. "Said food was expensive and I should be grateful for what I got." Jonah paced by the window, watching the trail. "We bought ourselves time, but not much. When they realize she's gone, they'll come here. It's the only place that makes sense." "Then we don't wait for them." Elise stood, her jaw set. "We take Emily to her father. We get his testimony about everything, dates, names, how the operation works. Then we ride for Helena and the territorial marshal." "That's a 2-day ride, minimum. Then we'd better leave soon." "You're in no condition." "I'm in better condition than Emily, and she just hiked 5 miles. Elise cut him off. "We're running out of time, Jonah. Every hour we wait gives Garrett more time to prepare, more time to cover his tracks. We have to move now." He wanted to argue, wanted to lock both of them in the cabin where he could protect them. But she was right, and they both knew it. "We rest tonight," he finally said. "Leave at first light. Make for Howard's farm first, then Helena." He looked at Emily. "Can you ride?" "Yes, sir." "Good, because tomorrow we're ending this." That night, none of them slept well. Jonah kept watch by the window, rifle across his knees. Every sound outside made him tense, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of wind through branches, the crack of a twig under some night creature's paw. Elise sat by the fire with Emily, speaking in low tones. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw Emily crying, saw Elise holding her hand. Two women who'd survived the same nightmare, finding strength in each other just before dawn. Elise came to stand beside him. "She's finally sleeping." "Good." He didn't take his eyes off the window. "She'll need her strength. So will you." She touched his arm gently. "When's the last time you slept? I'll sleep when this is over." "Jonah." She waited until he looked at her. "Thank you for everything, for finding me, for keeping me safe, for Emily. My father chose his friend well." "I haven't kept you safe yet. Not until Garrett's behind bars and you're far away from here." "Where will I go?" The question hung in the air between them. He hadn't thought that far ahead, had been too focused on immediate survival. But she was right to ask. She had no home, no family, a baby on the way. Where would she go when this was over? "We'll figure it out," he said finally. "One problem at a time." She smiled faintly. "That's not much of a plan." "It's the best I've got." As the sun broke over the mountains, painting the forest gold, they saddled Copper and prepared to leave. 3 people with nothing left to lose, riding toward a confrontation that could end in freedom or death. Jonah looked at the cabin one last time. 10 years he'd hidden here, wrapped in guilt and grief, and in years of existing without living. Maybe it was time for that to end too. They reached Howard Finch's farm by mid-morning. The property sat on the eastern edge of Timber Ridge, a modest plot with a weathered farmhouse, a chicken coop, and fields gone to seed. It looked abandoned, but smoke rose from the chimney in thin wisps. Jonah approached cautiously, rifle ready. Emily started to call out, but he stopped her with a raised hand. Wait, let me make sure it's safe. He circled the property first, checking for signs of ambush, fresh tracks, disturbed ground, anything that suggested more than one occupant. Finding nothing suspicious, he finally knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately. Howard Finch stood there, thinner than when Jonah had last seen him, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes. He looked at Jonah blankly for a moment, then his gaze shifted past him to where Emily stood beside Elise. "Emily?" His voice cracked. "Baby girl, Papa." Well, she ran to him, and he caught her in his arms, both of them sobbing. Howard sank to his knees, holding his daughter like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. But Jonah and Elise waited, giving them their moment. Finally, Howard looked up, tears streaming into his beard. "How they said if I tried anything, we got her out," Jonah said simply. "But they'll know by now. You need to come with us." "Where?" "Helena, the territorial marshal. You're going to tell him everything." Howard's face went pale. "They'll kill me." "They're going to kill you anyway." Jonah stepped closer. "You know too much. The only reason you're still breathing is they needed you to keep quiet and do what they said. Now that Emily's free, you're a liability." "He's right, Papa." Emily pulled back to look at her father. "Please, these people saved me. Let them save you too." Howard stood slowly, helping Emily up. He looked older than his years, worn down by months of impossible choices. "All right, I'll testify. I'll tell them everything." "Start now," Elise said. "We need to know what we're facing." They moved inside, and Howard made coffee with shaking hands. As it brewed, he began to talk. "It started about 3 years ago. Sheriff Garrett approached me about borrowing money, said he had a business opportunity, needed investors. I didn't have much, but I gave him $50, figured helping the law was a safe bet." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out the business was trafficking women. When I tried to back out, he said I was already complicit, said if I didn't help, he'd arrest me as an accomplice." "That's when they took Emily?" Jonah asked. "Not right away. At first, they just had me keep quiet about things I saw. Women coming and going from the old Morrison place, strange men in town asking questions. But then, about 6 months ago, someone nearly escaped a saloon girl who'd figured out what was happening. She got as far as the edge of town before they caught her. Garrett decided he needed better security. That's when he made me an offer I couldn't refuse." "Your daughter, for your cooperation," Elise said. Howard nodded miserably. "They took her from church, said she was being held somewhere safe, that as long as I did my job, she'd be fine. My job was to keep the women at the Morrison stable until they were ready to transport them. How many women?" Jonah's voice was hard. "4, that I know of. The first 3. Howard's voice dropped. "They're gone. Shipped off to California. I think maybe dead. I don't know. I tried not to think about it." "Their names," Elise said. "We need their names. The first was Catherine Wells, widow, no family. Disappeared about 18 months ago. Everyone thought she'd moved east." Howard rubbed his face. "Second was a woman named Rose, didn't catch a last name. She worked at the saloon, the one who almost escaped. And the third was Jenny Parker, a homesteader's daughter. Her father died in a mining accident, and she had no one else." Elise wrote the names on a piece of paper. "Who else is involved besides Garrett? His deputy, Frank Miller, the one you must have tied up at the mining camp?" A man named Dutch Peterson who owns the freight company he handles transport. And Howard hesitated. Who? Jonah pressed. James Thornton owns the lumber mill. The name hit Jonah like a physical blow. James Thornton, the man he'd accused of murdering his family 10 years ago, the man the town had protected, had rallied around, while calling Jonah a grief-crazed lunatic. You're sure? His voice came out strangled. I'm sure. He's the one with connections in California, the one who finds the buyers. Howard looked at Jonah's face and understanding dawned. Oh, God, your family, the fire. You said Thornton was responsible, and everyone thought you were crazy? I wasn't crazy. Jonah's hands clenched into fists. I was right. Elise touched his arm. Jonah, my wife and son died because of him, because he wanted to silence my friend Samuel, and killing Samuel's best friend's family sent the message he needed. He looked at Howard. Can you prove it? Can you connect Thornton to my family's murder? No, that was before my time with them. But if Samuel was investigating Thornton's business dealings... Howard trailed off. Maybe that's why. If Samuel found evidence of fraud or criminal activity, he did. Elise spoke quietly. My father was the town accountant. I found his papers after he died, notes about missing shipments, altered ledgers, money that didn't add up. I didn't understand what they meant at the time. I was 15 and grieving. I burned them like I burned everything else that reminded me of him. The room fell silent, except for the crackling fire. 10 years of grief and guilt. And the truth had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. We ride for Helena, Jonah said finally. Howard? You're coming with us. Emily, too. She's a witness to her own captivity. We get this testimony to someone who can act on it. And we bring these men down. It's 2 days hard riding, Howard said. We don't have enough horses. Then we take Thornton's. Jonah stood, reaching for his rifle. His mill is a mile from here. He keeps a stable with at least 6 horses. You can't just steal a man's horses, Howard protested. Watch me. Elise stood as well. I'm coming with you. No, you stay here with Emily. Keep watch. If anyone comes, you run for the woods and don't look back. For once, she didn't argue. Maybe she saw something in his face that told her this wasn't negotiable. Maybe she understood that some reckonings had to happen alone. The lumber mill sat in a shallow valley, accessible by a single winding road. Jonah left Coppertide a quarter mile out and approached on foot, using the tree line for cover. It was past noon now, and the mill was busy with workers sawing and stacking lumber. But the stable sat apart from the main operation, closer to Thornton's house. Jonah counted 3 horses in the paddock quality animals, well-fed and groomed. Stealing them would be simple. The stable hand was young, more interested in reading a dime novel than watching for thieves. But simple wasn't what Jonah wanted. He wanted Thornton to know, wanted the man to understand that his crimes were finally catching up with him. He circled around to the main house, a 2-story structure that spoke of wealth, built on blood. Through the window, he could see Thornton at his desk, going over papers. The man had aged well, silver hair, expensive suit, the look of a respectable businessman. No one would ever suspect him of murder and trafficking. That was about to change. Jonah walked straight up to the front door and knocked. A housekeeper answered, her eyes widening at the sight of his rifle. "Sir, you can't tell Thornton that Jonah Burke is here to collect a debt." The housekeeper fled. A moment later, Thornton appeared, and his face went white. "Burke, I thought you were dead." "Disappointed." Jonah stepped inside without waiting for invitation. "We need to talk." "Get out of my house. Not until you hear what I have to say." Jonah closed the door behind him. 10 years ago, you had my family killed. Samuel Morrison was investigating your business, found evidence of your criminal activities, and you silenced him. But killing Samuel wasn't enough. You wanted to send a message to anyone else who might talk. So you targeted his best friend, me. That's insane. But Thornton's voice lacked conviction. Is it because I've got testimony from Howard Finch about your trafficking operation? Names, dates, everything, and I'm taking it to the territorial marshal in Helena. You're done, Thornton. Thornton's hand moved toward his desk drawer, where he probably kept a pistol, but Jonah's rifle was already aimed at his chest. "Don't! You have no proof of anything," Thornton said, but sweat had broken out on his forehead. "I have enough, and when they start digging, they'll find more. How much fraud over the years, how many women sold, how many murders covered up." Jonah took a step closer. "Martha and Daniel Burke. Say their names." "I don't know what you're—" "Say their names." The rifle never wavered. "Martha and Daniel Burke." Thornton whispered, "My wife and son burned alive because you needed to protect your empire." Jonah's finger tightened on the trigger. It would be so easy. One shot, and 10 years of pain would have its revenge. But he thought of Elise, waiting at the farmhouse, of Emily, reunited with her father, of Howard, finally choosing to do the right thing, of the baby that would be born in a few months, needing a world with justice, not just vengeance. He lowered the rifle slightly. "You're going to write a confession? Everything? The trafficking, the murders, all of it?" "I'll do no such thing. Then I'll shoot you right here. And Garrett will have no one to protect him. He'll turn on you the moment he's caught, trade your name for leniency. Either way, the truth comes out. But if you confess now, maybe you'll live long enough to see a courtroom instead of a lynch mob." Thornton stared at him, weighing his options. Finally, he moved to his desk and pulled out paper and pen. His hand shook as he wrote, but he wrote everything. The fraud that started it all, bribing the old sheriff, taking over the operation when Garrett became sheriff, the trafficking network, the names of accomplices in California. And at the end, in a hand that trembled so badly the words were barely legible, "I ordered the deaths of Martha and Daniel Burke to silence Jonah Burke and prevent further investigation into my business affairs." He signed it, dated it, pushed it across the desk. Jonah took the paper, folded it carefully, and put it in his pocket. "I need 3 horses. Take them. Take whatever you want. Just leave. One more thing." Jonah leaned on the desk. "When they come for you and they will tell them Jonah Burke says hello." He walked out of the house, past the gaping housekeeper, to the stable. The stable hand took one look at his face and fled. Jonah saddled 3 horses, taking his time, making sure they were secure. Then he led them back to where Copper waited and started the long ride back to Howard's farm. He'd gotten what he came for. Justice. Not revenge. Evidence. Not bloodshed. But the weight of that confession in his pocket felt heavier than any rifle he'd ever carried. Because now there was no turning back. They had everything they needed to destroy Garrett's operation and bring down everyone involved, which meant Garrett had nothing left to lose. And desperate men were the most dangerous kind. When Jonah reached the farmhouse, Elise took one look at his face and knew, "You got it. I got it." He dismounted and handed her the confession. She read it, her expression hardening with each line. "This is enough," she said finally. "This ends it." "This starts the ending," Jonah corrected. "We still have to get to Helena alive, and Garrett's going to do everything he can to stop us." Howard emerged from the house with Emily. "Are those Thornton's horses?" "They are now. Can you ride?" "Haven't been on a horse in years, but I'll manage." "Good. We leave in 1 hour. Pack light food, water, weapons if you have them. We're not stopping until we reach Helena, or they force us to." Elise looked toward town, visible in the distance. "They know by now about Emily. Probably about your visit to Thornton. They'll be coming. Let them come." Jonah checked his rifle, reloaded it with fresh ammunition. "We've got truth on our side, and sometimes that's the strongest weapon there is." But as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time, that somewhere in Timber Ridge, Sheriff Garrett was gathering his men, preparing for one final confrontation, and when it came, not everyone would survive. They didn't make it an hour. Jonah was cinching the saddle on the third horse when he heard at the distant thunder of hoofbeats, many of them, coming fast from the direction of town. He looked at Elise, and she nodded. She'd heard it too. "Inside," he ordered. "Now." They moved quickly. Howard grabbed Emily and pulled her toward the house. Elise followed, but not before checking her pistol. Jonah brought up the rear, scanning the horizon. Through the trees he could see dust rising. At least 6 riders, maybe more. "How did they find us so fast?" Howard's voice shook. "Doesn't matter." Jonah moved to the window, assessing the situation. The farmhouse was defensible, but not ideal wooden walls that bullets would punch through easily. Limited sight lines, only one door at the back for escape. "We can't outrun them now, not with Emily weakened and the horses not ready." "Oh, so we fight." Elise stood beside him, surprisingly calm. "We hold them off long enough to make an opening. Then you 3 ride for Helena while I cover your escape." "No." Elise's voice was steel. "We don't split up. That's what got us into this mess in the first place, people trying to fight alone." The riders were closer now. Jonah could make out Sheriff Garrett in the lead, his deputy Frank Miller beside him. Behind them, 4 more men he recognized from town mill workers, probably in Thornton's employ, all of them armed. They stopped about 50 yards from the house, just out of rifle range. Garrett dismounted slowly, hands visible, playing at civility even now. "Burke," he called, "send out the girl and the woman. Do that, and maybe we can work something out." Jonah stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. "The only thing we're working out is your arrest." "I've got testimony from Howard Finch, written confession from James Thornton, names, dates, everything. It's over. Garrett." The sheriff's face tightened. "Thornton gave you a confession, signed and dated, along with the names of everyone involved in your operation. Then Thornton's a dead man." Garrett's hand moved to his pistol. "But so are you if you don't surrender right now." "I don't think so." Jonah leveled his rifle. "You shoot me, and this place becomes your graveyard. We've got 4 guns in here and enough ammunition to hold you off until nightfall. By then, someone will have heard the gunfire. Questions will be asked. You really want to risk that?" Garrett was silent, calculating, behind Jonah. He could hear Elise positioning herself at the side window, Howard at the back. Emily remained in the corner, clutching the spare pistol he'd given her. "You're trapped, Burke," Garrett finally said, "even if you hold us off. Where will you go? I own this town. I own every road out of here. You'll never make it to Helena. Maybe not. But I'll die trying, and that confession will make it there eventually. Someone will find it, and your empire falls either way. Not if there's no one left to testify." Garrett's smile was cold. "You really think Thornton's confession will stand without witnesses? I'll say it was coerced, forged, whatever I need to say. Without you, without Finch, it's just paper." He had a point, and Jonah knew it. Dead men couldn't testify, but alive, running, they still had a chance. "Last offer," Garrett called. "Give me the confession and the witnesses. I'll let you walk away. Burke, you can disappear back into your forest. Live out your days in peace. That's more than you deserve after what you've cost me." "I cost you?" Jonah's voice rose. "You murdered my family. You trafficked innocent women. I did what I had to do to survive in this territory." Garrett cut him off. "You think law and order just happen? Someone has to make the hard choices. Someone has to get their hands dirty so decent people can sleep at night. You're not making hard choices. You're a coward hiding behind a badge." Garrett's face flushed red. "I gave you a chance. Remember that." He raised his hand, and his men dismounted, spreading out. They were going to rush the house from multiple angles, overwhelming them with numbers. Standard tactics. Jonah fired first. Not to kill, not yet, but to establish the line. His bullet kicked up dust at Garrett's feet, and the sheriff jumped back. "Next one goes through your chest," Jonah promised. The next few seconds were chaos. Garrett's men opened fire, and bullets punched through the farmhouse walls. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Emily screamed. Elise returned fire from her window, deliberate shots that forced the men to take cover. Howard, despite his shaking hands, managed to get off 2 shots from the back window. "They're trying to circle around." "Hold them!" Jonah fired again. And one of the mill workers cried out, grabbing his leg, not a kill shot, but enough to take him out of the fight. The gunfire was deafening in the confined space. Smoke filled the air. Jonah's ears rang, but he kept firing. Reload, firing again? They had to make every shot count. Ammunition wouldn't last forever. "Papa," Emily's voice cut through the noise. "Papa, you're bleeding." Jonah glanced back. Howard had been hit, blood spreading across his shoulder. Not fatal, but bad enough. The man slumped against the wall, his rifle clattering to the floor. "I'm okay," Howard gasped. "Keep fighting." But they were losing ground. More bullets smashed through the walls. One caught the water bucket, sending it spinning across the floor. Another shattered the lamp, spilling oil that Elise quickly kicked away from the fire. "We can't hold them," she said, reloading her pistol. Her face was pale but composed. "They'll burn us out or rush us. We need another option." Jonah's mind raced. The back door led to open ground. They'd be cut down before they made it 10 feet. The front was blocked by Garrett's men. The windows were too small to climb through quickly. They were trapped, just like Garrett had said. Unless... "The root cellar," he said suddenly. Does this place have one? Howard nodded weakly. Under the kitchen, trap door behind the stove. Where does it lead? Tunnel. Goes about 30 yards out. Comes up in the old chicken coop. Howard coughed, and blood flecked his lips. My grandfather built it during the Indian troubles. Haven't used it in years. It was a chance, maybe their only one. Elise, take Emily and Howard down. Follow the tunnel, get to the horses, and ride. Oh, what about you? I'll hold them here. Make them think we're all still fighting. When you're clear, I'll follow. That's suicide. It's our only play. He grabbed her hand, squeezed it hard. Take care of them. And if I don't make it, you'll make it. Her eyes were fierce. You promised me justice. Jonah Burke, don't you dare break that promise. She kissed him then, quick and hard, then pulled away before he could respond. Come on, Emily, help me with your father. They moved the stove lighter than it looked, decades old and rusted. The trapdoor beneath was swollen with age, but Elise pried it open with a knife. Darkness yawned below, smelling of earth and rot. I'll go first, she said. Emily, you help lower your father down. They worked quickly. No time for hesitation. Howard groaned as they maneuvered him through the opening. But he bit back his pain. Emily followed. Then Elise looked back at Jonah one last time. 10 minutes, he said. Then I'm right behind you. She nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Jonah closed the trapdoor, shoved the stove back over it as best he could one-handed. Then he grabbed every gun in the house, 4 rifles, 2 pistols, and began moving between windows, firing from different positions. He had to make Garrett think they were all still here, fighting from multiple angles. Outside. Garrett's voice. Rush them. They're running low on ammunition. The men charged. Jonah fired, dropped one, fired again, missed. A third shot clipped another man's arm, but they kept coming, emboldened by desperation or greed or fear of their boss. He moved to the side window, fired twice more. His shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. Sweat stung his eyes. How long had it been? 5 minutes, 8. A bullet passed so close to his head he felt the heat of it. The wall behind him exploded in splinters. 10 minutes. It had to be 10 minutes. He grabbed the last rifle, fired blindly through the door, then ran for the kitchen, shoved the stove aside with strength born of desperation, yanked open the trapdoor, and dropped into darkness just as the front door crashed open and Garrett's men flooded into the house. The tunnel was narrower than he'd expected, the walls pressing close. He crawled forward on hands and knees, rifle dragging behind him. Overhead, he could hear boots stomping, men shouting, "They're gone! There's a tunnel! Find it! Find them now!" Jonah crawled faster. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, though it couldn't have been more than 30 yards. His lungs burned. His wounded side, the knife cut from days ago that had never properly healed, tore open again. He felt blood, warm and wet, soaking through his shirt, then light, blessed light, streaming through cracks in wood. The chicken coop, half collapsed, but still standing. He pushed through the opening and staggered to his feet. Through the slats, he could see the farmhouse, smoke rising from where someone had set fire to it. Garrett's men were pouring out, searching, and there, at the tree line, Elise sat on horseback with Emily mounted behind her. Howard slumped on the second horse, barely conscious. The third horse waited, empty, for him. Jonah ran. His legs felt like lead. His vision swam. Behind him, someone shouted they'd seen him. Gunfire erupted. A bullet whined past his ear. Another kicked up dirt at his feet. He reached the horses. Elise grabbed his arm, hauling him up. Go, go, go! They rode hard into the forest, bullets chasing them, the sound of pursuit close behind. But Jonah knew these woods, knew every trail, every hiding spot, every shortcut that a man on foot could take, but a horse on a worn path couldn't. He led them deeper, away from the trails, through dense underbrush that tore at clothes and skin. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded, confused by the maze of trees. They rode until the horses were lathered and heaving, until Howard passed out completely and had to be tied to his saddle, until Emily was sobbing with exhaustion and fear. Finally, as night fell and darkness made further travel impossible, they stopped in a small clearing beside a creek. Jonah slid from his horse and collapsed. His side was on fire, his vision blurring. Elise was beside him instantly. "Let me see." She peeled back his shirt, and he heard her sharp intake of breath. The wound had reopened badly, bleeding freely now. "We need to cauterize it," she said. "Emily, start a fire, small one, with dry wood so it doesn't smoke much." As Emily moved to obey, Elise looked into Jonah's eyes. "This is going to hurt, I know." She heated her knife in the flames until it glowed red. Jonah bit down on the leather strap, bracing himself. The pain was incredible, white-hot and all-consuming. He heard himself scream, muffled by the leather, and then everything went dark. Jonah woke to pale morning light filtering through pine branches and the smell of wood smoke. His side throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, but the sharp agony was gone. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Easy." Elise's hand pressed gently against his chest. "You lost a lot of blood." He blinked, focusing on her face. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. But she was smiling. "How long was I out?" "All night. It's morning now. We need to move soon. But I wanted to let you rest as long as possible." She handed him a tin cup of water. "Drink, slowly." The water was cold and sweet, probably from the creek. He drank half, then looked around the clearing. Emily sat by Howard, who was conscious but pale, his shoulder wrapped in bandages torn from someone's shirt. The horses grazed nearby. Still saddled. "How's Howard?" "Alive. The bullet went through clean, missed anything vital. He'll live if we can get him to a doctor soon." Elise checked Jonah's bandage, her fingers gentle but efficient. "You, on the other hand, came very close to bleeding out. That wound was deeper than I thought." "I've had worse." "I don't doubt it." She sat back. "We're about 15 miles from Helena, maybe more. If we push hard, we can make it by nightfall. But we'll be exposed on the main road for the last 5 miles. No cover, no place to hide if Garrett catches up." "He will catch up. He can't afford not to." Jonah struggled to sitting, ignoring the protests of his body. "He knows we're heading to Helena. He'll take the main road, ride through the night if he has to. We might have a few hours head start, no more." Emily spoke up, her voice small. "Then why don't we hide, wait for him to pass, then go back? Because he won't pass. He'll have men watching every approach to Helena. The only way through is straight ahead. And fast." Jonah looked at Elise. "How much ammunition do we have left?" Not much, maybe 20 rounds total between all the guns. 20 rounds against 6 men, possibly more, if Garrett had picked up reinforcements in town. The mathematics of survival didn't look good. Then we need help. Jonah pulled himself to his feet, swaying slightly. Helena has a telegraph office. If we can get a message to the territorial marshal before Garrett's men spot us. That's a big if, Elise said, but I don't hear any better ideas. They broke camp quickly, covering signs of their presence. Howard needed help mounting his horse, and Jonah wasn't much better. But they managed. Emily rode with Elise again, and they started north. The forest gradually thinned as they climbed higher into the mountains. By midday, they'd reached the ridge that overlooked the valley where Helena sat, a sprawling collection of buildings, larger than Timber Ridge by far. The territorial capital, such as it was, civilization, law, safety. If they could reach it, look, Emily pointed down at the road below. Even from this distance, they could see riders, 4 of them, positioned at intervals along the approach to town, Garrett's men watching. He's got the road covered, Howard said weakly. We can't get past. But Jonah was studying the terrain, his logger's eye assessing angles and approaches. The road? Yes, but there's an old mining trail on the east side. Comes down behind the assay office, right into town. It's steep, dangerous for horses, but possible. How dangerous? People have died on it. Horses, too. He looked at them. But it's our only chance. They circled east, staying below the ridgeline to avoid being spotted. The mining trail was worse than Jonah remembered, barely a trail at all anymore. More of a rock slide with occasional flat spots. The horses balked, sensing danger. We lead them down, Jonah said, on foot, one at a time. It took an hour to descend what should have been a 15-minute ride. Emily went first, nimble and sure-footed, despite her ordeal. Then Elise, leading her horse with calm determination. Howard struggled, his wounded shoulder making balance difficult. But he made it. Jonah came last, each step sending fire through his side. Halfway down, his vision blurred, and he stumbled. His horse copper pressed against him, literally holding him up until the dizziness passed. Good boy, he whispered, just like Samuel always said, smartest horse in Montana. They reached the bottom as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. The assay office was 100 yards away, then the main street, then the marshal's office, so close. Wait! Elise grabbed his arm. Someone's there. She was right. A man stood outside the assay office, smoking a cigarette. One of Garrett's men. Jonah recognized him as one of the mill workers who'd attacked the farmhouse. He's watching the trail, Howard said. Garrett thought of everything. They pulled back into the shadows of a building. Jonah's mind raced. They couldn't wait. More men might arrive. Couldn't fight. They were outnumbered and nearly out of ammunition. Couldn't retreat. Howard was fading fast, and Jonah himself wouldn't last much longer without proper medical care. I'll go, Emily said suddenly. He doesn't know what I look like. I'll walk right past him, get to the marshal's office, bring help. Too dangerous, Elise said immediately. More dangerous than what we've already done. Emily's young face was set with determination. I'm the only one he won't recognize. Papa's wounded. Mr. Burke can barely stand. And you? She looked at Elise. They definitely know what you look like. She had a point, and they all knew it. Give me the confession, Emily said. If something happens, at least the marshal will have the evidence. Jonah hesitated, then pulled the folded papers from his pocket. Thornton's confession and Howard's testimony, both signed. If he tries to stop you, you run. Don't be brave. Just run. Understand? I understand. Emily took the papers, tucked them inside her dress. And Mr. Burke, thank you for my father, for everything. Then she walked out into the open, moving with the casual gait of someone who had every right to be there. The guard looked up, watched her pass with mild interest, then went back to his cigarette. She was 30 yards away, 40, 50. Then the guard's eyes widened. He dropped the cigarette and reached for his gun. Someone must have described her. Someone who'd seen her at the farmhouse or the mining camp. Run, Jonah shouted. Emily ran. The guard raised his pistol. But before he could fire, Jonah's rifle barked. The shot went wide. His hands were shaking too badly, but it was close enough to make the guard dive for cover. Emily sprinted down the street, her dress flying behind her. People stopped to stare. More of Garrett's men appeared from doorways, drawn by the commotion. We have to back her up, Elise said, drawing her pistol. They moved into the street, weapons ready. The guard who'd been watching the trail fired at them, and Jonah returned fire. His shot hit true this time. The man went down, clutching his leg. Shouts erupted. Someone rang a bell. More people appeared, some armed, some just curious. In the chaos, Jonah couldn't tell who was friend or enemy. Emily reached the marshal's office and burst through the door. "Hold your fire!" a voice boomed. A tall man emerged from the marshal's office, silver-haired, wearing a badge with eyes that missed nothing. "Territorial Marshal Thomas Williams, lower your weapons, all of you." The marshal's presence had an immediate effect. Men who'd been raising rifles lowered them. The crowd settled, uncertain. "What in God's name is happening in my town?" Williams demanded. Emily appeared beside him, holding out the papers. "Sir, these people rescued me. I was kidnapped and held for months. These documents prove everything: trafficking, murder, corruption. Please, you have to help them." Williams took the papers, his expression darkening as he read. When he looked up, his face was granite. "Where is Sheriff Garrett?" "Coming," Jonah called, still standing in the street with his rifle. "He's been running a trafficking operation out of Timber Ridge. These people can testify to it. That confession names him and everyone involved, including James Thornton of the Timber Ridge Mill," Williams said, reading. "This is substantial." He looked at his deputies. "Take these people inside, get the medical attention, and someone fetch the town doctor." As they moved toward the office, a new sound reached them, more hoofbeats, many of them coming fast from the south. Garrett and his remaining men thundered into town, pulling up short when they saw Marshal Williams and his deputies standing ready. "Marshal," Garrett said, forcing a smile, "thank God you're here. These people are fugitives, murderers, and thieves. I've been pursuing them for days." "Is that so?" Williams held up the confession. "Because I have testimony here that says quite the opposite. Says you're running a criminal enterprise. Says you're complicit in murder and trafficking." Garrett's face went white, then red. "That's forged. Those people forced confessions, threatened innocent men. James Thornton's signature looks genuine to me. So does his seal." Williams descended the steps, his deputies flanking him. "You're under arrest, Sheriff Garrett. You and every man riding with you, or The hell I am. Garrett's hand moved to his gun. Don't! William's voice was ice. You're surrounded by 6 armed deputies and about 20 armed citizens. You draw that weapon, you'll be dead before it clears leather. For a long moment, Garrett sat frozen. Then his shoulders sagged. He was done, and he knew it. Get down from that horse, Williams ordered. All of you. They dismounted slowly. Williams' deputies moved in with iron shackles. As they led Garrett away, the sheriff looked at Jonah with pure hatred. But you've destroyed everything. For what? A dead man's promise. For justice, Jonah said. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to understand it. Inside the marshal's office, a doctor was already tending to Howard's shoulder. He looked at Jonah's bandaged and whistled low. That needs proper stitching. You're lucky to be alive. I've been hearing that a lot lately, Jonah said. As the doctor worked, Marshal Williams sat across from them, going through the testimonies line by line. This is extensive, he said finally. With this evidence, I can issue warrants for everyone named here. Thornton, the deputy, the freight company owner, all of them. What about the women? Elise asked. The ones who were taken. Can we find them? I'll send telegrams to California tonight. If they're in San Francisco like these documents suggest, we'll find them. Williams looked at her. You're Elise Morrison, Thomas Burke's widow. Yes? Your husband was a good man. Came to me about 6 months ago with suspicions about Garrett. Said he was gathering evidence, but wanted to wait until he had something solid. William's expression softened. I never heard from him again. I assumed he'd dropped the investigation. I should have followed up. He was murdered, Elise said quietly. Poisoned. The evidence is in Thornton's confession. Then we'll add that to the charges. William stood. You're all free to go. I'll need formal depositions tomorrow. But for tonight, get some rest. The territory owes you a debt, all of you. As they filed out into the evening air, Jonah felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years' peace. Not complete, the wounds still ached. The memories still burned, but the beginning of peace. Justice, finally, after a decade of waiting. Elise took his hand. What now? Now, he looked at her, at Emily helping her father walk, at the town settling into evening calm. Now we figure out how to live again. 6 months later, spring came to Montana with a gentleness that belied the harshness of the winter past. Snow melted from the mountain peaks, feeding streams that rushed with new life. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and the air carried the scent of pine and possibility. Jonah stood in front of the rebuilt stable at the old Morrison homestead, running his hand along the fresh-cut timber. The structure was solid now, clean and bright, with none of the shadows that had haunted it before. Where chains had once hung from the walls, there were now stalls for horses. Where blood had stained the floor, there were now clean boards that smelled of sawdust and hope. You've done good work. Howard Finch walked up beside him, his left arm still moving stiffly from the shoulder wound, but healing well. Samuel would be proud to see his place coming back to life. We've done good work, Jonah corrected. Couldn't have managed it alone. It was true. Over the winter, Howard and Emily had stayed, helping rebuild. What had started as temporary shelter had become something more permanent. The farmhouse, what remained of it after the fire, had been torn down and rebuilt too, larger this time, with enough room for all of them. a family cobbled together from broken pieces. Emily emerged from the new house carrying a basket of tools. At 17 now, she'd grown stronger over the months, the haunted look gradually fading from her eyes. She still had nightmares. Sometimes Jonah heard her crying through the walls on bad nights, but she smiled more often than not these days. "Mr. Burke, the fence posts are ready for you to set," she called, "and Elise says lunch will be ready in an hour." What Jonah nodded his thanks and headed toward the northern pasture where new fence posts lay waiting. The property was slowly transforming from abandoned homestead to working ranch. They'd purchased 6 horses, using money from the territorial government reward money for bringing down Garrett's operation. Small recompense for years of pain, but it was a start as he worked, setting post and rhythm with Howard. His mind drifted to the trial. It had taken place in Helena over 3 cold weeks in February. Marshal Williams had been thorough, gathering testimonies from everyone involved. Jonah, Elise, Howard, and Emily had all testified. So had the deputy who'd freed Elise from Garrett's office, young Frank Miller, who'd turned state's evidence in exchange for leniency. And they'd found the women, 2 of them, still alive in San Francisco, working in conditions that made prison look merciful. Catherine Wells and Rose McKenna. Jenny Parker's fate remained unknown, but Williams suspected she'd been killed when she tried to escape. Her body was never found. The convictions had been swift. James Thornton and Sheriff Garrett were sentenced to hang. The execution had taken place 3 weeks ago. Jonah hadn't attended. He'd felt no need to watch men die, even men who'd destroyed so much. Justice was enough. Revenge would have tasted like ash. "You're thinking about the trial again," Howard said. Not really a question. "How can you tell? You get this look, like you're somewhere else entirely." Howard wiped sweat from his brow. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing, letting the law handle it instead of taking matters into your own hands. Some days I'm not so sure I am, because if you'd killed Thornton that day at the mill, you'd have been no better than him. You'd have been a murderer, and Emily and I would have lost the best friend we ever made." Howard clapped him on the shoulder. "You showed me what it means to be a man, not through violence, but through choosing right even when it's harder." They worked in silence for a while, the companionable quiet of men who'd been through fire together and emerged as brothers inside the house. Elise stood at the kitchen counter kneading bread dough, her movements practiced and sure. Her belly swelled beneath her apron now, 8 months pregnant, the baby due any week. She'd bloomed over the winter, growing stronger despite or perhaps because of the life growing inside her. Emily sat at the table peeling potatoes, chattering about the new foal that had been born last week. Elise listened with half an ear, her mind on other things. The baby had been active all morning, pressing against her ribs, reminding her constantly of its presence. Thomas's child, a piece of him that would live on, that she would raise with love and stories of the gentle schoolteacher who'd been taken too soon. But also, she knew, Jonah's child in every way that mattered, because he would be there for the first cry, the first step, the first word. He would be the father this child knew, even if blood said otherwise. They hadn't married yet, hadn't even discussed it formally, though the assumption hung in the air between them like morning mist. They shared a home, shared their days and nights, shared everything except a bed Jonah insisted on sleeping in the barn loft, some old-fashioned notion about propriety that made her smile even as it frustrated her. "You're thinking about him again," Emily said, grinning. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. You get this soft look whenever you think about Mr. Burke." Emily's eyes twinkled. "Papa says he's going to ask you to marry him soon. Says he's just waiting for the right moment." "Your papa talks too much." "He's probably right, though." Emily finished the last potato and started on carrots. "You should say yes when he asks. He's a good man, the best man I know besides Papa." Elise's hands stilled in the dough. "It's complicated, Emily. I loved Thomas deeply. Part of me still does. Is it wrong to love someone new while the memory of the old love still hurts? I don't think love works like that. I think there's room in a heart for more than one person." Emily spoke with the wisdom of someone who'd seen too much darkness too young. "Thomas would want you to be happy, and Mr. Burke makes you happy. I see it in how you smile when he comes in from the fields." Before Elise could respond, a pain shot through her abdomen. Sharp and sudden, she gasped, gripping the counter. "Elise!" Emily was on her feet immediately. "What's wrong?" "The baby. I think it's time." Emily's eyes went wide. "Now, but you said you had another week. Babies come when they're ready, not when we plan them." Another contraction. Stronger. Elise breathed through it, counting like the midwife had taught her. "Get Jonah, and send someone to town for Mrs. Patterson." Emily ran, shouting for her father as she went. Within minutes, Jonah burst through the door, his face pale. "How long between the pains?" he asked, remarkably calm, despite the panic in his eyes. 5 minutes, maybe less. The midwife is an hour away." He moved to her side, supporting her weight. "We might not have that long." "Then you'll have to help me." Elise tried to smile, though another contraction was building. "You've delivered foals before. Can't be that different." "That's very different. Then we'll figure it out together, like we figured out everything else." They moved her to the bedroom, the room they'd prepared weeks ago with clean linens and supplies. Howard arrived with hot water. Emily gathered towels, and Jonah stayed by Elise's side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her brow, speaking words of encouragement, even though his own hands trembled. The labor lasted 6 hours, 6 hours of pain and fear and desperate prayer. The midwife arrived halfway through, and Jonah had never been so relieved to see another person in his life. But when complications arose, the baby was breech. Turning wrong, it was Jonah's steady hands that helped Mrs. Patterson turn the child. His voice that kept Elise focused and breathing. His strength that she drew on when her own strength failed. And when the baby finally came, sliding into the world with a lusty cry that filled the room with sound and fury and joy, it was Jonah who caught him. Jonah who held the tiny, perfect body and felt tears stream down his weathered face. "A boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, smiling, healthy and strong. Elise reached out with his shaking arms, and Jonah placed the baby against her chest. She looked down at her son, Thomas's son, her son, and felt love so fierce it hurt. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mama, and we're so glad you're here." The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but seeking. His tiny fist wrapped around Elise's finger with surprising strength. Jonah stood back, giving them space, but Elise reached for his hand. "Come here. He needs to meet you too." "Elise, come here. Jonah!" He moved closer, looking down at the baby with wonder and something like fear. "He's so small. He'll grow." She guided his hand to rest on the baby's head, dark hair still damp from birth. "I thought, if you don't mind, I'd like to name him Samuel. Samuel Thomas Morrison Burke." Jonah's breath caught. "Morrison Burke. Our family. Both our families. All of us. Together." She looked up at him, eyes bright with tears or in exhaustion. "If you'll have us." He sank to his knees beside the bed, overcome. For 10 years he'd believed himself unworthy of family, of love, of anything good. And now here was this woman offering him everything: a home, a child, a future he thought was dead and buried with Martha and Daniel. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "None of us deserve the good things we get. We just have to be brave enough to accept them." Elise touched his face gently. "My father trusted you to protect me. You did that. You saved me, saved Emily, brought justice for Thomas and all the others. You've earned this happiness, Jonah Burke. Now stop arguing and say yes." "Yes," he said. And then he was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes to all of it." Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat diplomatically. "I'll just give you folks some privacy. Call if you need anything." She left with Emily and Howard, closing the door behind them. In the quiet that followed, Jonah sat beside the bed, watching mother and child. Samuel had fallen asleep, tiny chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm. "He has Thomas's nose," Elise said softly, "and your stubbornness. I'd wager." She smiled. "Probably. Poor child doesn't stand a chance." Her expression turned serious. "You know you'll be his father in every way that matters. Thomas would want that, would want him to have someone strong and good to look up to. I'll try to be worthy of that. You already are." She shifted the baby slightly, wincing. "Now, about that proposal Emily claims, her father claims you're planning." Jonah laughed, a sound of pure joy he hadn't made in years. Should have known Howard couldn't keep a secret. He took her free hand, held it between both of his. "I was going to wait, make it proper, romantic. But nothing about us has been proper or romantic so far. So why start now? Why, indeed? Elise Morrison Burke, widow of Thomas Burke, daughter of Samuel Morrison, survivor of horrors that would have broken lesser souls. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I can't promise you an easy life, can't promise wealth or comfort, but I can promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to protect your son like he was my own, to love you with everything I have for however many days we're granted." "That's the most words I've heard you string together in 6 months," she said, smiling through tears. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes, Jonah Burke. Yes to all of it." He leaned forward carefully and kissed her forehead, then pressed his lips to the baby's head. "Welcome to the family. Samuel, your grandfather was a good man. Your father was a good man. And I promise to honor them both by loving your mother and you for the rest of my days." Outside, spring evening settled over the Montana wilderness. In the stable, Copper nickered softly to the new foal. In the house, Howard and Emily prepared a celebration dinner. And in the bedroom, a family pieced together from tragedy and loss, forged in fire and pain, looked toward a future that finally held light instead of shadow. Some chains, Jonah thought, are meant to bind us. The chains of love, of family, of choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Those were the chains he'd wear gladly for the rest of his life. 3 weeks later, Pastor Williams from Helena made the trip to the Morrison Burke homestead for a wedding. The ceremony was simple, no fancy dress, no elaborate decorations, just family, and a few friends from town who'd come to respect these people who'd brought justice to a lawless territory. Howard walked Elise down the aisle between rows of chairs set up in front of the new stable. Emily stood beside her as maid of honor, holding baby Samuel. And Jonah, dressed in his cleanest shirt and newest pants, stood waiting with an expression of wonder on his weathered face. The vows were traditional, spoken in voices that shook with emotion but didn't falter. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in applause. "You may kiss your bride," the pastor said. Jonah did, thoroughly, while people whistled and laughed and Samuel wailed his objection to being ignored. At the celebration afterward, as the sun set and lanterns were lit and someone produced a fiddle, Jonah found himself alone for a moment at the edge of the gathering. He looked at the house, the stable, the people laughing and dancing, his family, his home. "I kept my promise," he said quietly, "to Samuel Morrison, to Thomas Burke, to Martha and Daniel, to everyone he'd lost. I protected them, and they saved me in return." A hand slipped into his. Elise, radiant in the lamplight, smiled up at him. "Come dance with your wife." "I don't dance. You do now." And so he did, swaying awkwardly to the music, his wife in his arms and his son sleeping peacefully nearby. He'd come to that stable 6 months ago to buy a horse and found instead a purpose, found family, found life. The chains that had held him in darkness for 10 years had finally broken, and in their place were new chains of love, of commitment, of chosen family that set him free. As stars emerged overhead and the music played on, Jonah Burke smiled. For the first time in a decade, he looked toward tomorrow, not with dread, but with hope. And that, he thought, was the greatest gift of all. Sometimes the hardest chains to break aren't the ones we can see. For 10 years, Jonah Burke carried guilt like iron shackles, believing he didn't deserve a second chance at happiness. He'd lost everything and buried himself in isolation, convinced that was his penance. But Providence had other plans. When he stumbled into that abandoned stable looking for a horse, he found something far more valuable purpose: redemption, and proof that it's never too late to begin again. This story reminds us that broken people can build beautiful things together, that choosing to stay and fight, even when running seems easier, defines our character, that the families we choose can be just as sacred as the ones we're born into. Jonah learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting those we've lost. It means honoring them by living fully again. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, and sometimes our greatest blessings arrive wrapped in our darkest moments. The question is, will we have the courage to accept them? Have you ever had a second chance that changed everything? What broken pieces in your life became something beautiful? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.